Republican Minority Leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy. He was heard on audio, you might have heard about this, just after the January 6th riot, that he would recommend to then President Donald Trump that he should resign, that Donald Trump should resign his position as president. The GOP leader was not happy about the riot. He didn't like that Trump held a rally that day, but had denied to the media that he would say such a thing about Trump resigning his position. Well, that audio was released right after McCarthy denied he had said that. So it looks like he was being he wasn't being totally honest about that, Kevin. That he actually did say Trump not only should resign, but that he's probably going to be impeached, which he was.
Is that hard for you to say, that Kevin McCarthy was caught lying?
Yeah, I want to make sure I said it right.
Now I know a politician lied. How could that possibly be surprising enough to even be a news story? But this is, and in my opinion, it should be. As you said, Tom, in the wake of January 6th, McCarthy reportedly said, "What Trump did is unacceptable. Nobody can defend that, and nobody should defend it." Then when it was reported, he said it never happened, and the tape recording comes up, and it turns out he did. Joining us now is Roshini, political strategist. Good morning, Roshini. How are you?
Good morning. Lots to dive into here, guys.
Is this a big deal, no big deal, or somewhere in between?
Really, I think it's somewhere in between, and I only say that because believe me, lies are terrible. We have to think about the legality and the circumstances. So, first off, did he say those things behind closed doors, not to the media, in a place where he did not think he was being recorded? All right, so that's one thing to be thinking about. Now, if you said something, regardless to who it was, and then you deny that you said it to someone, that is a lie. I mean, that's the definition of a lie. But we have the whole tape recording issue in here, the actual audio, and where did that audio come from? Who recorded it? Did he know he was being recorded? Those kinds of things. But even some quoted statements that I didn't see or hear audio with, it does sound like he said something like that. So this is really not a good time for him, especially if he's trying to run for speaker and those kinds of things.
If a politician just lies and there's no audio tape, I sort of forget about it. But when there's evidence that supports a lie, somehow I remember them. I probably will remember this. I'll probably look at Kevin McCarthy a little differently. He could have said something like, I don't know exactly what I said at the time, but whatever I said was a private conversation and not something that I said publicly. And sometimes I may say things privately that I don't say publicly. It depends on the situation. But now here he is. He said it didn't happen. The tape recording seems to indicate that it did. As a coach, what would you be telling Kevin McCarthy to do next?
Yeah, he's got to really come clean. So whatever did happen, he's got to really get it together and be upfront about it. And, the line that I don't like that always gets used, but, I was taken out of context. But perhaps that's what he should have said initially. Now all of this other stuff is out there, so it's really hard for him to say that exactly. But moving forward, he has to be as truthful as possible. He has to almost go out of his way to show that he's being transparent and truthful.
What's interesting about this is that Donald Trump and Kevin McCarthy aren't still on very good terms. And while a lot of Republicans are calling out McCarthy, are calling him a rhino and he shouldn't be the next speaker if Republicans take back the House in the midterms, Trump says, I don't like what he said about me, but I kind of like him. We've made up, and Kevin's a good guy and a great Republican. So if Trump supports McCarthy, will forever Trumpers also support him, do you think?
They probably will, but the thing is, we have to look at everybody who's in our Congress. I don't know that there are a lot of really squeaky clean people across the entire body. So I think they really need to watch the accusers and who is coming after him from whether it's the Democrats or his own party. They need to really look at it. I also saw a piece about how Liz Cheney, there was some recording out of her office. She doesn't know how it was recorded. So, now we're getting into all of this with recordings, and when it comes to the states, individual states have rules about this. If one person, some laws say if both people know it's recorded, that's fine. If one person doesn't, then that can never be used against someone in a court of law. Now, obviously, the court of public opinion is a much bigger court and crosses state and federal lines. So this should be a wake-up call, Tom and Kevin, to really all politicians right now.
Senator Elizabeth Warren comes out. She's not surprisingly, she's upset at Kevin McCarthy, calls him a traitor. But she's a Democrat, right? So do Republicans care what she thinks of McCarthy? Do the American people expect that from her? I mean, she wouldn't come out and never say that McCarthy's the best. So it's not that surprising. And is it damaging at all to his reputation?
I don't know if it's so damaging as much as if she was going to speak up, I would have liked her to attach it to something maybe that she's observing the House should be working on. And now this puts into question his own ability to be credible in those conversations, things like that. I mean, just kind of coming out and saying what she said is very on brand for her. But my recommendation, if I were coaching her, she also needs to come up with some new branding language, right? Both parties, individuals need to really look, we are in a new day. Nobody is really believing us. So then any time any politician, regardless of political persuasion, gets caught in a lie or is lying or is, accused of lying, all politicians need to worry about that.
Yeah, I always like the saying that coaches give, don't say anything that you don't want to see on the news. If you don't want to see it on the news, don't say it. Do you think the flat-out denial was necessary by McCarthy? It seems like he could have just danced around it a little bit. It is also troubling to me that that this phone call was taped without his knowledge and that it was released.
Right. He probably shouldn't have come right out and denied it in the way he did, especially if he knew that it could possibly be true. He needed to look into it. He needed to say, well, what exactly are you talking about? Just ask himself, ask the accusers for more proof of what they're talking about. And, we've unfortunately gotten to a time where the leaders of our country can't really have behind closed doors conversations. And I'm all about transparency, but frankly, sometimes they need to do that to come to agreement, to work through issues that the rest of us really don't need to know about because they're working on our behalf. If they think a behind closed doors meeting is going to persuade some people to go in a different direction publicly, then I think those kinds of meetings, both at the Supreme Court level as well as with the Congress and the Senate, are very necessary. It doesn't mean they're not being transparent. It means they are trying to negotiate on behalf of the American people. I don't know if that's what Kevin McCarthy was doing, but connected to the events of June 6th or January 6th, perhaps he was actually, trying to come up with a plan for the Republicans to be both critical of their president while at the same time siding with him as a member of the same party.
And it was publicly known back then that McCarthy was not happy about what happened on January 6th. He was not happy with Trump in that moment. And at least that part of it was public at the time. These words were not public until recently. So we'll see how this in the long term affects Kevin McCarthy and whether or not the GOP changes the trajectory if they win the House in the midterms in November. Thanks so much, Roshini Rajkumar, political strategist, joining us. Thanks so much, Roshini.